In the last 12 months, Wall Street has poured an estimated $700 billion, yes, billion with a B, into artificial intelligence infrastructure.
Right, which is just a staggering number to even wrap your head around.
It's massive. I
Yeah.
mean, that is capital expenditure on a scale that honestly rivals the Apollo program.
Oh, absolutely.
And yet, on the exact same day I was looking at that number, I read this MIT study that just dropped. It's called Project NANDA, and it revealed that 95% of custom enterprise AI pilots completely failed to deliver any measurable return on investment.
Yeah, zero measurable ROI. It's brutal.
So the question we have to answer today is, who is wrong? Like, is the smartest money on Wall Street completely delusional? Or is there, I don't know, a fundamental misunderstanding of the math behind how these models actually work inside a business?
It is definitely the latter. There is a massive structural misunderstanding of the math.
Okay.
What we're watching right now is an entire industry trying to price in perfection while completely ignoring the physical and, well, the probabilistic realities of the technology itself.
Right. And look, if you are an operations director or a business owner listening to those two numbers right now, 700 billion spent versus a 95% failure rate, you might be tempted to just scrap your entire AI budget right now.
Yeah, just pull the plug.
Exactly. Just call it a day. But hold on, because today we're going to unpack exactly why that failure rate exists, and more importantly, why the companies that actually understand the underlying mechanisms are still succeeding.
And succeeding wildly in some cases.
Right. So, quick ground rules before we jump in. We are the Prentice AI research team. Prentice AI is an independent media property and a learning hub. We cover the industry.
Right. We do not sell AI tools.
We do not build them. I just want to make that super clear. When we talk about OpenClaw or NimmaClaw or Claude or ChatGPT today, that is strictly editorial coverage of third-party tools.
We have no secret consulting contracts to quietly funnel you into.
Exactly. Our only loyalty is to you, the business owner, trying to figure out where to actually allocate your capital this quarter. So no hype, no glossy keynote presentations. We're treating you as smart, busy, and highly skeptical.
Which you should be.
Which brings us to the central thesis of our analysis for April 2026. And this is the core of part one today. The binding constraint on enterprise AI right now is not capability.
Nope.
The models are plenty smart. The binding constraint is reliability and trust. Capability has sprinted a marathon, but reliability, which, let's be honest, is the only thing a business actually pays for, is still tying its shoes at the starting line.
That's the perfect way to phrase it. And if
Yeah.
you don't understand the mechanical difference between capability and reliability, you're going to burn a lot of cash trying to deploy these tools.
So let's start with the illusion of capability. Because if you just casually scroll the headlines over the last few weeks, you would literally think we are living in a science fiction movie.
Oh, for sure. The PR cycle is relentless.
It really is. I mean, in mid-April, Anthropic released Claude Opus 4.7, and this model scored a 70% on Cursor Bench,
Right.
which is a massive jump from the 58% its predecessor scored just a little while ago. And then OpenAI's GPT 5.4 dropped in early March with a 1 million token context window and native computer use capabilities.
And the immediate reaction from the public, and honestly, a lot of tech journalists, is usually, wow, the frontier's moving so fast, human-level intelligence is right around the corner.
Right, the hype machine goes into overdrive.
Exactly. But you really have to read the fine print, deeply read it. Anthropic explicitly admitted in their own documentation that Opus 4.7 is actually less capable than an internal unreleased model they were calling Mythos.
Okay, let's unpack this. Stop right there. Why on earth would a company spend hundreds of millions of dollars developing a state-of-the-art model only to intentionally withhold it from the public and release a dialed-back version?
Right.
I mean, if I have the best product in the world, I ship it. That's capitalism.
You ship it if it's traditional software. But these labs are hitting a wall where the commercial viability of a model is directly opposed to its safety and predictability.
How so?
So Mythos exists, right? But it is only available to a handful of highly vetted partners. They are actively withholding it because the unconstrained capability of these true frontier models introduces reliability risks that they just do not know how to manage at scale yet.
Okay, give me an example. What kind of risk?
Well, think about it like this. If an AI writes a highly capable but buggy script for an internal beta tester, it's a learning moment.
Sure.
But if it writes a buggy script that silently executes across millions of enterprise servers because it has unrestricted computer access, that's a catastrophic liability event. It's a company killer.
So the narrative I keep seeing on Twitter that AI progress is slowing down because the actual physics of neural networks stopped working, it's totally false.
Completely false. The progress is there. The raw capability is there. It's just literally locked in a basement because they cannot trust it.
Wow. Okay, so while they keep the true frontier locked in the basement, they fight this marketing war using public benchmarks to sell the dialed-back models.
Exactly. They need to show progress to investors. But here is the open secret inside the research community right now. Traditional benchmarks are effectively dead.
I really want to dig into that because every single time a new model drops, my feed is flooded with these colorful charts showing, 94% on this test, 96% on that test.
Right, but let's look at the actual mechanisms of those tests. Take MMLU, for example, the Massive Multitask Language Understanding Test.
That was the big one, right?
It was. In 2023, it was the absolute gold standard. It asked these complex multiple-choice questions across 57 different subjects. But today, MMLU is completely saturated.
Meaning they all get A+.
Exactly. The models all ace it. So the industry had to move the goalposts. They moved to SWE Bench.
Okay, explain how SW Bench actually works mechanically. Like, what is the AI literally doing during this test?
So SWE Bench doesn't just ask the AI a simple coding question. It connects the AI to a massive real-world GitHub repository.
Okay.
And it gives the AI an actual historical bug report that a human developer submitted years ago. The AI has to autonomously navigate the code base, understand the architecture, find the broken lines of code, write a patch, and actually submit it.
That sounds incredibly rigorous. It's basically mimicking the workflow of a real salaried software engineer.
It was rigorous for about 6 months.
Wait, really? Just 6 months?
Yeah. The models mastered it so quickly that the evaluators had to roll out SWE Bench Pro just to have a ruler long enough to measure the new systems.
That's insane.
And the exact same thing happened with WebArena, which tests an AI's ability to navigate websites and click buttons. It became WebArena verified.
Right.
But even on the absolute hardest tests we have right now, like the GPQA Diamond, which is a graduate-level reasoning benchmark, where actual human PhDs struggle to get 60%, the 3 U.S. frontier labs are in a dead heat.
Do we have the exact numbers on that?
Yeah, so Opus 4.7 is at 94.2%. GPT 5.4 Pro is at 94.4%. And Google's Gemini 3.1 Pro is at 94.3%.
Okay, come on. That is statistically indistinguishable. It's just noise at that point.
It is entirely noise. And here is the mechanism you have to understand behind those numbers.
Yeah.
The labs now know exactly how to train for these specific tests. It is the exact AI equivalent of teaching to the test in a high school classroom.
Okay, so if I'm an operations director and I see a press release claiming an 85% benchmark score, I shouldn't even care.
You should only care if that specific benchmark correlates perfectly with the exact output you are paying the software to produce in your business.
Right.
Getting an A+ on a graduate physics exam does not mean the AI knows how to accurately process a messy PDF invoice from your logistics supplier without hallucinating.
That is such a crucial point, but this raises a massive technical question for me. If the frontier models are locked in a basement and the base neural networks aren't getting exponentially larger, where are the performance gains on things like Cursor Bench actually coming from?
That is the big mystery for most people.
Right, because how did GPT 5.4 get so good at natively using a computer if the core brain isn't that much bigger?
And that is the most important technical shift of the last 2 years. The gains you are seeing in these releases are not coming from pre-training. They're coming from post-training.
Okay, break that down for us. Pre-training versus post-training. Because I hear these terms thrown around at conferences all the time, but the actual mechanical difference is rarely explained in plain English.
Sure. Think of the creation of an AI model in 2 very distinct phases. Pre-training is the brute force phase.
The expensive phase.
Very expensive.
Yeah.
You build a massive data center, you take a monumental chunk of the internet, and you force the neural network to ingest it.
Yeah.
The model's only job is to predict the next word billions and billions of times for months on end.
Right.
This costs hundreds of millions of dollars in electricity and raw compute.
I love the analogy we use internally for this. My favorite analogy for pre-training is the feral student.
Yes, exactly.
Imagine taking a child, locking them in a vast library for 10 years, and forcing them to memorize every single textbook, every encyclopedia, and every unhinged Reddit thread ever written.
A truly terrifying childhood.
Right. But when you finally unlock the door, that student is a feral genius. They have a massive general knowledge of the world, but they don't know how to speak politely, they don't know how to format a corporate memo, and they certainly don't know how to do a specific job like HR triage.
That is a perfect analogy. The feral student is your base model. Now, if you just release that feral student to the public, it will output chaotic, unpredictable text.
It's basically useless for a business.
Wholly useless. So post-training is the finishing school. It is what happens after the brute force memorization.
How does that actually work inside the lab, mechanically?
It relies heavily on reinforcement learning, or RL. Instead of just predicting the next word, you give the model a specific goal, like write a Python script without any security vulnerabilities, and you mathematically score its attempts.
Okay, but we aren't just having humans click thumbs up anymore.
No, we've moved far beyond human raters. The labs use massive synthetic data pipelines now.
Synthetic data meaning AI training AI.
Exactly. A highly capable model generates a perfectly structured ideal response to a complex prompt. Then, the feral-based model studies that synthetic example to learn formatting, tone, and logic.
Wow.
You're essentially using RL to teach the base model how to use external tools, how to read a web browser DOM, and how to follow a strict JSON schema.
So when OpenAI shipped GPT 5.4 with native computer use, they didn't magically grow a bigger brain.
Nope.
They just spent 6 months in the post-training phase obsessively drilling the existing model on how a mouse works and what a drop-down menu looks like.
Precisely. And as a business owner, you really need to care about this distinction for 2 reasons. First, post-training is vastly cheaper and faster than pre-training.
Okay.
Second, and much more disruptively, the secrets of post-training leak easily.
Explain that. If it's a massive trade secret worth billions, why does it leak?
Because it's a methodology, not a physical asset.
Ah, I see.
Pre-training requires a $2 billion supercomputer. You can't just steal that in your backpack. But if an OpenAI researcher publishes an academic paper hinting at a clever new reinforcement learning technique that makes models better at math.
Then someone else can just read the paper.
Exactly. A competing lab can read that paper, apply the technique to their own feral-based model, and replicate the gains in a matter of weeks. The scientific moat for post-training is incredibly shallow.
Which perfectly explains the rapid rise of the Chinese open-weight models that we are going to discuss heavily in Part 2. But before we get there, I want to touch on one more scientific development happening under the hood that operations leaders really need to track, and that's mechanistic interpretability.
Right. It is the attempt to finally solve the black box problem.
Yes. Because for years, the biggest excuse from IT departments resisting AI deployment was, look, we put data in, we get answers out, but we have absolutely zero idea what happens in the middle. We can't audit the thought process.
And if you're in a heavily regulated industry like banking or healthcare, that black box is a hard deal breaker. You just can't use it.
Right.
So mechanistic interpretability is the science of opening up that trained model and isolating the actual internal circuits.
But how do you even isolate a circuit in a network of 1 trillion parameters? That sounds impossible.
It is painstakingly difficult.
Oh.
Researchers use techniques like sparse autoencoders to map specific patterns of neural activation to human understandable concepts. They call these features.
Okay.
Anthropic famously mapped a Golden Gate Bridge feature inside Claude a while back.
I remember that.
Yeah, they found the exact cluster of artificial neurons that fire when the model is thinking about that specific bridge. And they proved it by manually turning the volume up on that feature.
What happened when they turned it up?
It caused the model to obsessively mention the Golden Gate Bridge in every single response, regardless of what the prompt was. You'd ask it for a recipe for pancakes, and it would tell you how the Golden Gate Bridge loves pancakes.
That's hilarious, but also kind of profound. Okay, so they can map a physical bridge. Can they map complex financial reasoning?
Not entirely, no. Let's be clear. They are nowhere near mapping the whole brain. But the claim that neural networks are entirely opaque is less true today than it was 2 years ago.
Okay.
Anthropic is using these interpretability tools right now in their pre-deployment safety evaluations to check for things like deceptive alignment. Slowly, the science is providing a way to explain why an AI made a decision, which is, the holy grail for enterprise compliance.
Okay, let's step back and look at the board here. We have models that ace graduate-level exams. We have advanced post-training techniques teaching them how to literally use computers. We're even starting to peek inside their brains.
Right.
If the technology is genuinely this good, why aren't these systems running our businesses yet? Why did 95% of those bespoke MIT pilots fail so spectacularly?
Because of the math of compounding errors. And to understand this, we have to look at how the independent research group METR evaluates models.
METR is doing great work.
They really are. They fundamentally changed the diagnostic framework for AI. They realized that Asking an AI to solve one difficult physics equation doesn't tell you if it can actually act as a reliable employee over an 8-hour shift.
Right. Isolated tests don't reflect reality.
Exactly. So they created a metric called the effective time horizon.
I love this concept. Let's unpack the time horizon.
The time horizon measures the length of an autonomous task at which the model can successfully complete its objective roughly 50% of the time.
Okay, 50%.
Yes. So METR spins up a secure virtual machine, gives the AI access to a web browser, a code editor, and a terminal, and assigns it a sprawling objective.
Like what?
Like, find this specific security vulnerability in this massive open source project, write a patch, run the unit tests, and submit the fix.
Oh man, it's an endurance test.
Is purely an endurance test. They measure how many minutes the AI can operate autonomously before it completely loses the plot, gets stuck in a loop, or makes a fatal error.
The analogy we use here is a rock climber. The old benchmarks, like MMLU, were basically measuring vertical leap. They asked, how high can the climber jump from a standstill? But enterprise work isn't a single jump.
Not at all.
It's not a single prompt and response. Enterprise work is scaling a sheer cliff face for 6 hours. The time horizon measures how long the climber can stay on the wall before their grip fails and they plummet.
And the endurance numbers are improving, but they are absolutely not where the hype suggests. In April 2026, METR reports that Opus 4.5 sits at roughly 320 minutes of effective time horizon.
320 minutes.
Yes. And GPT-5 is at roughly 214 minutes.
Okay, so Opus 4.5 can climb the wall for over 5 hours before falling off half the time. Honestly, that sounds incredible. If I have an intern who can work autonomously for 5 hours without messing up, I'm thrilled.
Yes, but your intern's mistakes don't usually permanently corrupt the back-end database in milliseconds.
Fair point.
Here is where the brutal reality of mathematics steps in. The reliability curve for an AI agent degrades superlinearly.
Super linear degradation. I want to spend real time on this because if an operations director understands this one single concept, it will save them millions of dollars in failed pilot programs.
Let's walk through the math. Human intuition is very, very bad at sequential probability.
We really are.
If you have a human employee who completes a 1-hour task successfully 95% of the time, you naturally assume that if you give them an 8-hour task, they will still succeed around 90% or 95% of the time.
Right. A good employee is a good employee. If they make a typo in hour 3, they hit backspace, fix the typo, and keep going. Human error is generally independent and correctable.
Exactly. But machine error in an autonomous agent workflow is not independent. It is sequential, and it compounds. If an AI agent makes a fatal error in step 4, step 5 is corrupted, step 6 fails entirely, and the whole task crashes.
Let's make this incredibly concrete for the listener. Walk me through a daily business example.
Let's take customer refunds. A mid-sized e-commerce company wants to automate its refund process using an AI agent.
Yeah.
It is a 20-step process.
Okay, 20 steps.
The AI has to open the customer support software, read the email, extract the order number. That's 3 steps.
Yeah.
It has to log into Stripe, search the order number, verify the transaction date. That's 3 more. It has to check the company's internal wiki for the return policy on that specific item category, determine eligibility, draft an email response, apply the refund in Stripe, log the interaction in Salesforce, and close the ticket.
Wow.
20 distinct steps.
Okay, let's say we are using a cutting-edge model, heavily post-trained. It is incredibly reliable. It executes every single one of those individual steps perfectly 95% of the time. 95% is an A grade in school.
It is an A grade for a single jump. But for the whole climb, you have to multiply the probabilities. 0.95 multiplied by itself 20 times.
So 0.95 to the power of 20.
Yes. And the result of that math is roughly 0.36.
36%.
36%. End to end, that highly intelligent state-of-the-art AI agent will successfully complete the 20-step refund process only 36% of the time.
Which means 64% of the time it fails.
It fails catastrophically. It issues a refund for $400 instead of $40. It sends the refund receipt to the wrong customer entirely. Or it gets stuck in an endless loop, checking the return policy wiki until the API just times out.
If I am a business owner, I cannot under any circumstances let a tool with a 64% failure rate operate unsupervised in front of a paying customer.
No, you can't.
The reputational risk and the financial risk are completely unviable.
This mathematical reality is the entire story of enterprise AI right now. It is the gap between the model is capable of understanding this task and the math allows me to trust this model unsupervised. Hallucination has not been solved.
Not even close.
Even on perfectly scoped summarization tasks, the best models still hallucinate between 0.7% and 1.5% of the time.
And people always bring up RA,
Yeah.
retrieval augmented generation, as the magic bullet for hallucination. Just connect the AI to your internal company documents so it doesn't make things up.
Right. And look, RA is fantastic. It grounds the model in facts, but it does not drive the error rate to zero.
It doesn't.
No. On open-ended enterprise queries, even with RAG, the median large language model hallucination rate hovers between 15% and 50%.
That's terrifying.
In specialized domains like medical diagnosis or legal discovery, it could be even higher because the vocabulary is so dense.
So if the cost of the AI being wrong, like issuing a bad refund or misinterpreting a vendor contract, is higher than the cost of the process being a little bit slow, you absolutely must have a human in the loop.
You must. There is no alternative right now. And this brings us directly back to the MIT Project NANDA study and why Wall Street panicked.
Right.
Because the market watched flawless 5-minute keynote demos from tech CEOs and assumed they could just plug a raw API into their back-end systems, fire half their staff, and go to the beach.
Let's dissect that MIT study because this is fascinating. 95% of enterprise AI pilot projects produced zero measurable P&L impact. When Wall Street saw that, the bears immediately started shorting the tech sector. They claimed AI was the biggest grift of the decade. Why is that narrative wrong?
It's wrong because it ignores the architectural distinction the study highlighted. The 95% failure rate applied specifically to bespoke internal builds.
Define a bespoke internal build for us.
Okay, imagine a mid-sized logistics firm in Ohio. The CEO reads a magazine article about AI and says, "We need an AI agent to route our delivery trucks."
Sounds like a standard Tuesday.
Right. So they hire a team of expensive external consultants. Those consultants take the raw OpenAI API, try to build a custom software wrapper around it, and attempt to wire it directly into the firm's legacy routing software.
And what happens?
They slam headfirst into the superlinear degradation math we just discussed. They get bogged down in data integration. The API rate limits out. The legacy system's data is messy, causing the AI to hallucinate routes.
It's a mess.
It's a complete mess. They try to build a 20-step autonomous agent from scratch, and it fails 64% of the time. 6 months later, the pilot is quietly killed, and millions of dollars are just written off.
But the study didn't just look at bespoke builds, did it?
No. And this is the part the financial press completely ignored. The study found that when companies purchased vendor-delivered systems that were deeply integrated into existing workflows, like an AI copilot feature built natively into their existing customer service platform like Zendesk or Salesforce, those projects succeeded about 2/3 of the time.
Wow. A 66% success rate versus a 5% success rate. That is a staggering difference. Why does the vendor-integrated tool work so much better?
Because the vendor Salesforce, for example, has already solved the integration problem. They control the data layer, they have pre-engineered the prompts, they have built guardrails to prevent the AI from taking unverified actions.
So they aren't building a feral agent.
Exactly. They aren't trying to build an autonomous agent. They are building a human-in-the-loop copilot that accelerates the existing human worker.
Now, the study also mentioned something called shadow AI.
Yes, shadow AI is absolutely thriving.
What is that exactly?
This is when your employees quietly buy a ChatGPT Plus or Claude Pro subscription on their personal credit card and use it on a second monitor to do their jobs twice as fast.
Ah, right.
They use it to write first drafts of emails, debug Excel macros, or summarize long PDFs.
So the individual productivity gains are real, and they're happening right now.
Very real. But at the enterprise level, the takeaway is unyielding. Generic intelligence does not integrate itself. If you buy raw API access and drop it into a Slack channel, it does not magically alter your profit and loss statement.
Without workflow integration, there is no enterprise ROI.
None.
You know, I see a perfect historical parallel here. This is the exact same lesson the corporate world learned during the rollout of massive ERP systems in the 1990s and the transition to cloud computing in the 2010s.
Oh, completely.
Just buying the servers or just buying the Oracle database didn't make you more profitable. Re-engineering your business processes to actually take advantage of the software is what made you profitable.
AI is not magic. It is software. And deploying software requires grueling change management.
Okay, let me push back on the macro picture here for a second. If 95% of these bespoke pilot programs are failing, and operations leaders are realizing how excruciatingly hard this integration is, wouldn't a rational market pump the brakes?
You would think so.
Right. You would expect the funding to cool off while the enterprise side catches up.
You would rationally expect that. But The exact opposite is happening.
Which brings us to the financial paradox of April 2026, the circular economics of AI capital expenditure. Walk us through these numbers because they are genuinely hard to comprehend.
Let's look at the revenue run rates first. Anthropic just hit a $30 billion annualized revenue run rate.
30 billion.
Yes. At the end of 2025, they were at $9 billion. That is explosive, historic growth. OpenAI is sitting at roughly $24 billion. 8 of the Fortune 10 are Anthropic customers.
But that revenue pales in comparison to what the hyperscalers are spending to support these companies.
It's a drop in the bucket. The hyperscalers, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Meta, are projected to spend $700 billion this year alone on data centers, networking gear, and silicon chips. $700 billion in a single calendar year.
If the enterprise adoption is struggling with integration, where is the economic justification for $700 billion in infrastructure spending?
Oh, yeah. You have to follow the money. And when you do, it reveals a dynamic that looks very much like a 19th century company town.
A company town. Explain that metaphor.
In a historical company town, the mining conglomerate pays the workers a wage. The workers then turn around and spend their entire wage at the grocery store owned by the mining conglomerate, and they pay rent for houses owned by the mining conglomerate.
The money never leaves the bubble.
Right. The money's just doing laps inside a closed ecosystem, creating the illusion of massive external demand. We are seeing a very similar loop in AI capital expenditure today. Let's trace a single dollar.
Please do. I want to see this loop.
OpenAI, to ensure they have enough compute power to train the next generation of models, signs a forward compute commitment. They have committed roughly $1.15 trillion over the next decade to infrastructure providers.
$1 trillion. Okay.
So OpenAI agrees to pay Oracle for massive server capacity. Oracle, in order to actually build those servers, takes that contract and buys billions of dollars of GPUs from NVIDIA.
Right.
NVIDIA reports massive profits. NVIDIA then takes a portion of those massive profits and invests them directly back into OpenAI as equity funding.
I want to make sure I am hearing you correctly. OpenAI gives money to Oracle, Oracle gives that money to NVIDIA, and NVIDIA gives it right back to OpenAI as venture capital.
Yes. And then the financial press reports NVIDIA's hardware sales as surging AI demand, which drives up NVIDIA's stock price, which inflates the valuation of the entire tech sector, which allows OpenAI to raise even more money at a higher valuation so they can commit to buying more compute from Oracle.
That sounds incredibly precarious. It sounds like suppliers paying other suppliers using investor money and disguising it as end-user demand.
Bloomberg analysts mapped out this exact deal web, and it is unambiguous. A very significant slice of that $700 billion capex is circular. Now, I want to be very precise here. It is not a complete house of cards.
Okay, that's good to hear.
There is real end customer demand. Those shadow AI subscriptions we talked about are generating billions. The integrated vendor tools are generating billions. But the magnitude of the infrastructure spending is running miles ahead of the measurable enterprise adoption.
My historical analogy for this is the 1999 dot-com fiber optic build-out.
Hey, that's a good one.
During the late 90s, telecom companies spent billions of dollars laying millions of miles of fiber optic cable under the oceans and across continents. They assumed consumer internet demand was going to explode overnight. But the demand didn't explode overnight. The telecom companies went bankrupt.
But the fiber was real.
Exactly. The fiber stayed in the ground. And a decade later, companies like Netflix, Google, and Amazon built trillion-dollar empires on top of that cheap, abandoned fiber.
It is a perfect comparison. The data centers being built right now by the hyperscalers are physically useful. The GPUs can generate revenue. The productivity gains from AI are vastly more tangible today than early internet productivity was in 1999. It is not a crazy bet.
Right.
But if the end customer demand, meaning businesses successfully navigating that reliability math and deploying at scale, doesn't catch up to the sheer capacity being built, the financial chain is going to violently shudder.
But there is a hidden constraint to this entire financial loop. Even if Wall Street wants to keep spending the $700 billion, they are hitting a physical wall that nobody in Silicon Valley likes to talk about.
Yes. The ultimate bottleneck is not money. It is not silicon. It is the physics of the power grid.
I read the research notes on this, and it is mind-blowing. Walk us through the electricity constraint.
An AI data center does not consume power like a traditional cloud server farm. The density of the GPU clusters requires an incomprehensible amount of electricity. We are talking about facilities demanding upwards of a gigawatt of power.
A gigawatt?
That is the equivalent of powering a mid-sized American city just for one building. Right now, roughly half of all U.S. data center builds planned for 2026 are expected to slip their schedules or be canceled entirely.
Because they can't get zoning approval.
Because the local electrical grids literally cannot support them. You cannot just plug a gigawatt facility into a standard local substation. You need massive, highly specialized industrial transformers to step the power down from high voltage transmission lines.
Right.
The current global supply chain lead time for a large power transformer is 5 years.
5 years. So Microsoft orders a transformer today, and they can't turn their servers on until 2031.
Precisely. Which is why the tech giants are taking extreme, unprecedented measures. They are bypassing the public grid wherever they can. We're watching tech companies buy decommissioned or struggling nuclear power plants just to secure exclusive behind-the-meter access to baseload power. Amazon Web Services bought a data center campus directly linked to the Susquehanna nuclear plant in Pennsylvania. Microsoft signed a massive deal to help resurrect 3 Mile Island. The next 24 months of the AI infrastructure story isn't going to be about who designs the smartest silicon chip. It is going to be about whether the United States can physically generate enough electricity to turn the chips on.
So if we look at the reality of April 2026, let's summarize part 1. The capability of these models is staggering, but the reliability on complex workflows is stuck at 36%. The bespoke pilot programs are failing because of integration friction. Capital is spinning in a circular loop, waiting for the enterprise to catch up, and the physical power grid is tapped out.
That is the unvarnished reality of where we are.
Capability has outrun reliability, and you, the business owner, must buy for reliability. That wraps up part 1 of our deep dive.
But we aren't done.
No, we are, because as business leaders, knowing where we are is only half the battle. If we are stuck in this friction point, what happens next? What does the landscape look like tomorrow?
That's the real question.
Welcome back to part 2. Let's pivot to where we are going over the next 24 months. Because while the U.S. labs fight over power grids and reliability benchmarks, the global map is shifting.
And it is shifting in a way that is incredibly beneficial to the listener.
Let's talk about the commoditization of capability, driven by the Chinese open-weight models. For the last 2 years, the mainstream media has framed the rise of Chinese AI strictly as a terrifying national security story. We hear about the geopolitical race, military applications, and export controls.
Right, it's always doom and gloom.
But for a business owner in Ohio or a software founder in London, how should they actually view this development?
They should view it as the single most business owner positive development of the year. It is a massive structural win for the consumer.
I disagree with that framing initially. How is a foreign model a win for my mid-sized business?
Because it decisively breaks the monopoly of the U.S. frontier labs. Over the last few months, models like DeepSeek V4, Qn 3.5, GLM5, and Kimi K 2.5 have flooded the market.
And these are good models.
These are not toy models. They use highly efficient architectures, like Mixture of Experts, to achieve near-frontier performance using significantly less compute. On almost every major benchmark, they are within striking distance of Opus and GPT-5.
But the crucial difference is how they are distributed. Right, they are open weights.
Exactly. Let's clarify that term because open weights and open source are often conflated, and it causes a lot of confusion.
Yeah, please define it.
Open source is a strict legal definition that guarantees the freedom to modify and distribute software without restriction. Many of these AI models don't technically meet the purest open source definition because they include acceptable use clauses.
Okay, so what does open weights mean?
Open weights means the lab spent tens of millions of dollars to train the neural network and then simply uploaded the finished parameters, the weights, for anyone in the world to download for free.
It's like a 5-star Michelin chef spending months perfecting a complex recipe, and instead of opening an exclusive restaurant, they just publish the exact chemical formula of the dish so you can cook it in your own kitchen.
Yes. And it is completely altering the market dynamics. Chinese open-weight models now account for roughly 30% of global model usage on API aggregator platforms.
30%.
30%. That is up from essentially zero in late 2024.
So bringing this back to the business owner in Ohio, if I can download a near-frontier model for free, why does Anthropic have a $30 billion run rate? Why isn't every enterprise just downloading DeepSeek today?
Because hosting and running a massive open-weight model yourself requires specialized DevOps talent and expensive hardware.
Right.
Most businesses don't want to be in the server management business. They just want to pay for an API. But the existence of the open-weight models creates commoditization. Intelligence is becoming a cheap commodity.
So it's about vendor leverage.
Exactly. A year ago, If you built your entire internal company workflow on an OpenAI model and OpenAI decided to double their API pricing, you just had to pay it. You were locked in. The switching costs were too high, and there were no viable alternatives.
You were trapped.
Today, if your U.S. vendor raises prices, you have highly credible, cheap alternatives. You can rent open-weight models for pennies on the dollar from neutral cloud providers.
What is the actionable advice here for a software architect listening to this?
The highest leverage architectural decision you can make in 2026 is building an abstraction layer into your software stack.
Don't get locked in.
Do not hard-code your application to one specific provider's API. Build a gateway. If Anthropic is the smartest today, route your traffic there. If Google offers a 50% discount tomorrow, flip a switch and route your traffic to Gemini. If an open-weight model drops an update that perfectly handles your specialized coding tasks, spin it up on your own server. Portability is power.
Having choices in models is fantastic. It drives down costs. But while the technology is democratizing, the rules governing how you are legally allowed to use that technology are violently fracturing.
The dream of a single, unified, global regulatory framework for AI is completely dead.
Let's compare the policy splintering between the United States and the European Union because it impacts anyone doing international business. In the U.S., under the Trump administration, we saw an executive order in late 2025, followed by legislation in March 2026. The core legal mechanism they deploy is called federal preemption.
And to be clear, we are analyzing the operational impact of this policy, not endorsing or condemning the politics.
Of course.
Federal preemption is a legal doctrine where federal law explicitly overrides state law. The administration is using it to strike down individual state AI regulations like the sweeping safety bills California attempted to pass. They are arguing that a patchwork of 50 different state laws harms federal innovation priorities.
If I run a U.S.-only tech startup, what does federal preemption mean for my daily operations?
In the short term, it provides regulatory relief. It means fewer compliance surprises. You don't have to hire a lawyer in every state to decipher conflicting auditing requirements.
That's a huge relief for a small team.
Right. The regulatory power is concentrated in federal agencies, and currently, those agencies are taking a relatively light-touch, pro-commercialization approach. However, the lack of robust state laws means there's still long-term uncertainty about what a durable, bipartisan federal regime will eventually look like.
Now contrast that light-touch approach with the European Union.
The EU AI Act is moving into broad, strict enforcement in August 2026. It classifies AI systems strictly by risk level, unacceptable risk, high risk, limited risk. And it includes massive penalty provisions for providers of general-purpose AI models.
How massive?
We are talking about fines that rival GDPR in their severity, scaling up to percentages of global revenue.
So if I run a software company in Chicago, but 20% of my customers are in France and Germany.
You should already have your compliance lawyers on speed dial. You are going to be hit with documentation requirements, transparency obligations, and classification audits. AI compliance is rapidly becoming a tax. It is a baseline cost of doing business that varies wildly by jurisdiction.
But our research team uncovered a fascinating nuance about regulation. The most immediate regulators for most businesses aren't the government at all.
No. The real regulators are the tech companies themselves.
The private acceptable use policies.
This is a profound shift in how software operates. The terms of service and acceptable use policies of Anthropic, OpenAI, and Google collectively dictate what tens of millions of businesses can and cannot do with intelligence.
Give me a concrete example of a private policy dictating a business outcome.
Take the cybersecurity industry. Recently, Anthropic updated Opus 4.7 with specific cybersecurity safeguards. They changed their acceptable use policy to explicitly prevent the model from assisting in certain types of exploit generation or vulnerability discovery.
On the surface, that sounds incredibly responsible. You do not want AI writing malware for state-sponsored hackers.
Of course not. But if you are a legitimate, white-hat cybersecurity firm, a company hired by banks to penetration test their networks and find the flaws before the bad guys do, your primary diagnostic tool just got nerfed.
Oh, I see.
You can no longer ask the model to help you find the zero-day vulnerability in your client's system because the model refuses the prompt.
It blocks you.
Yes. That restriction wasn't a law passed by Congress. It wasn't debated in Parliament. It was a private company's internal safety committee making a policy change. Your product's capabilities are now fundamentally dictated by your vendor's blog posts.
That is wild. The government is trying to protect society through legislation, but the private vendors are actually enforcing the daily operational boundaries. But speaking of societal impact, the most immediate issue business owners are grappling with isn't cybersecurity policy. It's the impact of AI on their own workforce. Let's look at the labor reality.
And we need to be incredibly disciplined here. There is so much noise and panic about labor. We are not going to extrapolate. We're not going to make claims that AI is going to take 100% of white-collar jobs by 2028.
Right.
We are only going to look at the hard, verifiable data available today in April 2026.
Let's pull the Goldman Sachs numbers. Goldman tracks this closely, and they report a net reduction of roughly 16,000 U.S. jobs per month since mid-2025, directly attributable to AI substitution.
16,000 jobs a month.
Mm.
In a U.S. labor force of over 160 million people, that is a fraction of a percent.
Right. And McKinsey surveys show that roughly one-third of companies expect workforce reductions of 3% or more over the next year due to AI efficiencies. So if we look at the aggregate numbers, it does not look like a catastrophic Great Depression-style crisis. The sky is not falling on the overall national employment rate.
But the distribution of that impact is highly uncomfortable. That is the honest framing. It is not an even 3% cut across the board.
Where's the pain concentrator? Where are those 16,000 jobs coming from?
Routine office work.
Yeah.
Basic legal contract review. First-line customer service triage. Entry-level data research. Routine code generation. There's a very sharp, very painful divergence forming between entry-level roles and mid-career roles.
Yeah.
Right now, AI is a fairly competent substitute for a 22-year-old college graduate doing rote tasks. It is absolutely not a substitute for a 42-year-old senior manager who possesses institutional knowledge, relationship capital, and fiduciary accountability.
I was talking to an ad agency executive about this recently, and it highlighted a terrifying structural risk. This executive realized he could replace his 5 junior copywriters, the 22-year-olds, fresh out of school, with a customized AI workflow for a fraction of the cost.
Right, because the AI generates 50 taglines in 3 seconds.
Exactly. He saves a ton of money, and his margins look phenomenal this quarter. But my question to him was, if you fire all the 22-year-olds today, where do your 35-year-old senior creative directors come from in a decade?
You have identified the apprenticeship gap. The corporate world has historically relied on junior, somewhat inefficient roles to serve as a paid apprenticeship. The junior copywriter writes 50 terrible headlines, gets yelled at by the creative director, and slowly learns how to write one brilliant headline. If you eliminate that junior tier, because the AI can do the rote work instantly, you sever the pipeline of human capital development. You are trading long-term institutional confidence for short-term margin.
We are destroying the training ground.
We are, and we are seeing the exact same divergence play out in the education system. It is a perfect parallel to the corporate labor market.
How so?
A few years ago, the primary fear in education was simple cheating students having ChatGPT write their history essays. But the reality today is much more insidious. We are seeing a massive divergence in student capability based entirely on how they use the tool.
Okay, split the groups for me.
The students who use AI as a Socratic tutor, who ask to explain difficult concepts, who tell it to quiz them on calculus, who debate historical events with it, are accelerating. They are learning faster and deeper than any cohort in human history.
But what about the other group?
The students who use AI as a substitute for thinking, who just copy-paste the homework prompt, grab the output, and turn it in, are hollowing out.
Hollowing out?
Yes. They are passing the class, but they are failing to build the underlying neural pathways of critical thought. They possess incredibly strong prompting skills, but zero underlying comprehension of the material. And schools are mostly not equipped to measure that hollowing out until the student hits a real-world wall.
Which brings us right back to the business owner listening to this. If you hire that student who used AI as a thought substitute, and they can only perform their job when the AI is working perfectly, what happens when the AI hallucination we talked about earlier rears its head?
That's the disaster scenario.
Right. What happens when the AI issues the wrong refund or drafts a contract with a fatal flaw? That employee does not have the baseline competence to catch the error.
Exactly. You have automated the doing, but you have destroyed the understanding.
So taking all of this together, the commoditized open weight models, the fractured global regulations, the compounding error math, and the hollowing out of the junior labor force. What actually happens next? Let's move to our concrete forecasts.
And we must emphasize, we hold these forecasts loosely. If the last 2 years of AI development have taught us anything, it is humility. These are analytical arguments with confidence levels, not oracle predictions from a crystal ball.
Let's start with a moderate confidence forecast from the research team. A capital expenditure correction is coming.
Yes. The 2026 spending pace, that $700 billion infrastructure build-out we dissected, is fundamentally outrunning the actual enterprise revenue pace. We expect a hyperscaler or two to eventually blink and slow their capital expenditure growth.
And what happens when they blink?
When that happens, the private AI lab valuations, which are currently priced for infinite 100x growth, will likely reprice to something much closer to a standard 30x tech multiple.
Is that a dot-com style crash?
No, it is a correction. It would actually be incredibly healthy for the ecosystem. It shakes out the tourists and forces the surviving companies to focus on actual margins, workflow integration, and reliable products, rather than just raising the next mega round of venture capital on the promise of an autonomous god machine.
Okay, here is the strongest take from the Prentice AI analysts. This is the forecast they have the highest conviction on. Over the next 2 years, reliability becomes the ultimate competitive edge, entirely eclipsing frontier capability.
This is the most important forecast for anyone building software right now. The lab that ships a model that is slightly less capable on a graduate-level reasoning benchmark, but massively more reliable end-to-end on real business workflows, will win the enterprise market.
We are entering the era of boring AI.
Yes, enterprises will happily pay a massive premium for boring AI. They want an AI that simply does not hallucinate, an AI that possesses excellent calibration, meaning it knows exactly when it doesn't know the answer, and it honestly refuses the task instead of hallucinating a plausible-sounding lie.
That sounds amazing.
Anthropic has been quietly positioning themselves for this exact market dynamic for 2 years, with their focus on mechanistic interpretability and constitutional AI. And we expect that bet to be vindicated.
And what about the dream of the autonomous AI employee that every startup in Silicon Valley is pitching right now?
General-purpose AI employees will continue to disappoint. The marketing will say, hire our virtual accountant. But the reality will be a fragile, probabilistic mess that fails 64% of the time.
Because of that math we did earlier.
Exactly. Success over the next 2 years is not going to look like a humanoid robot sitting at a virtual desk figuring things out. Success is going to look like tight, narrow verticals hitting 95% end-to-end reliability.
Agentic workflows, rather than autonomous agents.
Yes. A highly specific, rigidly coded tool that only does one thing. It triages customer support tickets for hardware routers, or it generates unit tests for Python code. Well-designed, deterministic software automation with tiny AI probabilistic steps embedded inside it, heavily guarded by human-in-the-loop verification.
So, as we wrap up this massive deep dive, we need to leave the listener with a roadmap. What should a thoughtful business owner or operations leader actually do with this information today? We've distilled the research into 5 practical takeaways.
The very first thing you need to do is start small and start real. Do not commission a 6-month, million-dollar pilot program to reinvent your global supply chain using AI. It will fail.
Just don't do it.
Instead, pick one repetitive, low-stakes task that you or your team actually do every single week. Automate it this week using an off-the-shelf tool. You will learn infinitely more about the friction, the latency, and the reality of prompt engineering by shipping one imperfect internal tool than you will by reading 50 industry white papers.
The second imperative is portability. We mentioned this earlier, but it is critical. Build abstraction layers into your software stack. The market is too competitive, and the open-weight models are advancing too fast for you to get locked into a single vendor's ecosystem. Portability is your vendor leverage.
Third, verification. You have to assume a human-in-the-loop architecture. In April 2026, human verification is not a temporary limitation that you have to grit your teeth and design around until the models get smarter. It is the correct, permanent architecture for any commercial deployment where the cost of being wrong is higher than the cost of being slow.
Fourth, when you are shopping for these tools, watch the right numbers. Stop looking at headline capability scores. Ignore the SWE bench leaderboards on Twitter. Demand reliability scores on the specific tasks you care about. If a vendor cannot provide end-to-end reliability metrics for your workflow, assume the tool is fragile.
And finally, the most important takeaway, do not sit out. Hearing about the 95% failure rate of bespoke pilots might make you want to just wait it out. Let the massive corporations burn their capital figuring it out right.
That is the wrong instinct. The cost of being late to this transition fundamentally exceeds the cost of adopting imperfectly right now. Even a mediocre, small-scale deployment teaches your organization the muscles of AI change management. It trains your staff on how to verify outputs. It buys you institutional learning that your competitors will have to pay for in blood later. You have a mandate? Ship something, anything, this quarter.
Which leaves us with one final provocative concept to mull over. As we look at the incredible capability, the staggering circular economics, and the shifting labor market, the absolute sleeper issue of the next decade is not capability, it is trust.
Explain the trust deficit.
Right now, we are in a honeymoon phase with AI. The errors are mostly funny. The hallucinations are memes on social media. But the first time a highly capable, unverified AI deployment causes a high-stakes disaster, a medical misdiagnosis that costs a life, a financial hallucination that crashes a regional bank, or a legal error that ruins a business, public opinion is going to freeze overnight.
The regulatory backlash will be swift and brutal.
It will be. And the companies that built robust verification architectures will survive it, while the companies that blindly trusted the API will face ruin. Anyone deploying AI right now in a high-consequence environment is ultimately placing a bet. But they aren't placing a bet on the intelligence of their AI model. They're placing a bet on the rigor of their human verification process.
It goes right back to where we started. We are used to software being perfectly diagnostic. We want it to be clean, binary, and infallible. But AI is not a database. It is a probabilistic engine. It is messy. It requires interpretation, oversight, and a deep understanding of its mathematical limitations.
And until these systems become perfectly reliable, if they ever do, your ultimate competitive advantage as a business is exactly how well you manage that mess.
Thank you for joining us for this extensive two-part deep dive. Stay skeptical, keep building those abstraction layers, and we'll see you next time.